Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Nick and Joe Show. My name's Nick. He's Joe. I'm in Sioux Lookout, and he's not.
I am
He's
not
in
in Sioux
Ottawa.
Lookout.
You are not in Sioux Lookout.
No.
You know what, Joseph? I really look forward to the next opportunity we have to be in the same room. That'll be fun.
Well, you're going to be. Are you heading down this direction around Easter time?
Yep, we'll be down. We leave the Thursday before Easter Sunday, which is otherwise known as Holy Thursday. And our travel days will be Thursday, Friday, probably get in Saturday sometime so that we can attend Easter services on Sunday with the family.
What day is that? What's the date?
The actual date,
Yeah.
Easter Sunday, will be I'm going to say the 9th. Sunday. We're at the 26th now, right?
Yes, the 26th.
Yeah, so it'll be the 9th.
Okay. Well, we'll work something out, Nick.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be down for a couple of weeks, so we should be able to find a way to get together and do a show, and who knows what else nefarious kind of deeds will happen.
We'll figure something out. We always do.
Yeah, we do. Now, I have a question for you, Joseph. How did you spend Earth Hour?
I spend Earth Hour. Well, first of all, when I remember it, which just goes to show you how important Earth Hour is to me. But when I remember Earth Hour, and I have to confess, I completely forgot about it. It didn't even register. I kind of knew Earth Hour was coming up, Nick. And the reason I knew it was coming up was because I noticed that I was starting to get these things from different sales groups, different organizations, drop shipping, because I look into drop shipping as a way to have some increased revenue. I don't actually do it. Maybe someday I will when I figure it all out.
Right.
But I do look at these things, and you know how Google is. Once you start to look into something, then next thing you know, all of the ads that are in your different feeds are going to be related to whatever your searches were.
Right.
So just all of the sudden, I started to notice that I was getting a lot of ads about different gadgets and trinkets and things like that related to Earth Hour. Like, for instance, you can have your Earth Hour T-shirt that you could sell on the internet. And I thought, okay, Earth Hour must be coming up soon. I didn't know what day it was, but I knew it was kind of out there. Anyway, to make a long story short, honestly, I didn't do anything this year. It passed without me knowing about it. And if I had known about it, I would have made a point of waiting till Earth Hour struck and then going around and turning all my lights on.
Well, I was thinking...
And let me just take a minute here, just to briefly tell you and our listeners and our viewers why that is, Nick. Because, everybody out there that thinks that they're doing a wonderful thing for the planet by turning off their lights and sitting around having candles lit, okay? First of all, if you buy into the argument that CO2 and CO are causing global warming, then you don't want to do that because you're creating a lot more greenhouse gases by turning off your electric lights and lighting candles. That's number one. Not to mention the fact that you're introducing a whole raft of pollutants into the air in the smoke that may not have anything to do with quote unquote greenhouse gases. And then on top of all of that, is the fact that having all of those light candles lit all over the place is actually dangerous. Now, I'm not saying never light a candle, but it's a lot more dangerous to have lighting in your home by candles than it is to have the electric
Electric
light
light.
switch flipped on.
Well,
So when I celebrate Earth Hour, this is why I turn lights on, because for me, it's a celebration of the incandescent light bulb, which was transformational. It allowed us all of a sudden to transform, to extend the day from 6 hours in the wintertime to whatever, okay, or from 14 hours in the summertime for whatever. New York City, the city that never sleeps, could only never sleep because of electricity and the incandescent light bulb and everything that comes from there. And when we invented the light bulb, when Edison invented the light bulb, all of a sudden, houses weren't burning down with the same frequency that they were before. And look at all of the pollution that we eliminated by eliminating the gas-fired lamps on streets in our cities. Okay, so the idea that somehow there's something bad about the light bulb and electricity is absolutely absurd. If there was a way that we could increase our energy efficiency, be even more environmentally friendly than we are right now with electricity, I'd say, okay, something to look at. But right now, this is the cat's meow. So for
but
me, Earth Day is not about rejecting modern technology. It's about celebrating
embracing
modern
it.
technology.
Now, Lisa in the chat room said just two words: solar lights. Okay, I get that. First of all, before I get into what Lisa said, uh, when I first heard, I found out when Earth Hour was. Um, my first inclination that was coming up was when I looked at the news today. Was yet Earth Hour was yesterday, and my first impulse was to grab the nearest tire, run it outside, and burn it. No, no, no. Let's don't do that. But I totally am on your side when it comes to, first of all, what are the candles made of that most people are going to use? Most people don't want to spend the money on a beeswax candle. Never mind the internal air pollution you create by burning a candle of any kind. The candle itself is made of paraffin. Paraffin is a byproduct of refining fossil fuels. So, are you really getting anywhere? You have to burn more candles than you would light bulbs to get an equivalent. Like, to light this room to this fashion, I need a chandelier over my head, you know? And so, the damage you're doing far outweighs any good. As far as solar lights are concerned, well, they do take those precious rare earth metals that are not mined in places that are very environmentally friendly. So while on the surface that's an appealing thought, overall, if your whole goal is to promote a healthy environment, mining of rare earth metals in some of these foreign countries without the regulatory conditions around them that make sure that the mining process is as because no mining process you can say is perfectly safe, but has as many checks and balances from an environmental point of view as we have here in North America. Like, you go to Africa or China, the environment's the last thing they're worried about. They're just digging holes and using
Uh,
anybody they can to,
including child labor.
including child labor. So you've got all these stories, you've got this situation. You're really promoting the wrong idea. You're going about it backwards. And I like your idea. I'm not here to denounce modern technology. I'm here to embrace it. So from that point of view, I completely agree with you. Besides, I think this whole mentality about putting carbon in the ground or carbon is pollution. I've said this a million times. Carbon's not your enemy. It's not pollution. It's plant food. And I think rather than try to take it out of the air, we should look at what happens when it slowly increases over time. This is why we have a 15% more green planet than we did in the year 2000. This is why places like in Africa are more green now than they were. We have better crop yields. Greenhouses use it. We've been down this 1,000 times. I don't
Yeah.
want to repeat that, but
Look,
in essence, world, this is nothing more than virtue signaling. It's all this is.
Nick, I cannot say enough of how ignorant and how damaging, ultimately, how harmful the woke environmental movement has been to the planet and to humanity. I am a very strong believer in being a good steward of our environment.
I am too.
Okay, I don't I don't need to be lectured about this, but let me give you an example. I did a segment on this in my show earlier this week, and then later in the week, I realized coincidentally that the United Nations was holding its first global water conference in
Yes.
decades. And I hadn't known about this. I had been commenting on the drought in Somalia, that there was a story that I think it was 43,000 people died last year as a result of this drought in Somalia. And they expect the numbers to increase this year. And when I was reading this story, people were talking about this is the outcome of climate change. And I got to thinking to myself, I said, Somalia is actually borders the Horn of Africa on the east coast of Africa. Somalia
Yep.
is actually a maritime country.
Yes, it is.
How is it possible that a country, a small country with a long coastline, is suffering from lack of potable water, of drinking water? And the answer is because nobody's actually using the technology and the know-how that exists now in order to provide water to the people who need water. Instead, they have us chasing our tails trying to stop the climate from changing. And I contrasted that in my show, and I'm doing it now again because it makes a very important point. I contrast that with what they've done in Israel, where instead of complaining about the environment, and instead of complaining about the fact that much of the water supply historically comes from countries that are not friendly to Israel in that region, so what the Israelis did was they built desalination plants.
Mm-hmm.
And the desalination plants now provide more than half of the water that Israelis consume. And almost all of the tap water, of the drinking water, is desalinized water from the Mediterranean Sea. And on top of all of that, there's a lake in northern Israel, which we call in Israel the Kinneret. The Kinneret is actually the Hebrew term for the Sea of Galilee, which is really nothing more than a lake. And not necessarily a very big one if you're from Canada, but everything seems big over there. The Sea of Galilee was in danger the water level was going down year after year after year. Guess what the Israelis did? What they've done is they've been pumping water, desalinized water, into the northern part of Israel, into the feeder streams and rivers of the Sea of Galilee. And today, the Sea of Galilee is up to its full potential again. Now,
So they put the water back.
okay, why am I saying this? Because at some point in time, you would think that people who are concerned about the environment would be concerned about the impact of the environment on people. And it seems to me that they want to just deal with the environment in complete isolation from the effect that it's having on people. If you want to deal with the drought in Somalia, or you want to deal with the drought in California, okay, build desalination plants. California has a long coastline on the Pacific coast as well.
And if anybody had the money to do it,
We this is not, money is not lacking. Political will is lacking.
Mhm.
And all of these diplomats that sit around and have caviar and champagne lunches, etc., and condemn us for not turning off our lights on Earth hour, okay? Or consuming water at vampire rates, I think was the term that they used this year this year in their press release. Okay? How about spending some of your time and energy dealing with the problems in a practical sense? Nick, I hate to say this, but we better go for a break. We're already well into the show here. So we're just going to have a short break here, a short commercial break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in less than 2 minutes here on the Nick and Joe Show. Stay tuned. Who says you can't turn the clock back? Experience the excitement of open-air flying and see Canada's National Capital Region like you've never seen it before from the open cockpit of a vintage 1930s biplane. Are you up for the adventure? Put on your helmet and goggles and strap yourself in. Book your flight today. Go to OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. That's OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. Ottawa Biplane Adventures, the adventure begins here.
Oh my gosh, that was so exciting! I gotta do it again.
Are we back now? Oh, live radio.
We are back. That was a short break.
Yes, it was, but that's okay.
Okay.
That's what happens when we don't pay attention to the clock.
I know. Well, I know this is
You know
what
something?
happens. Look,
This is why people begin to think conspiracy theories, because what you just said makes all the sense in the world. You've got this planet is 70% water. We are not running out.
no, there is zero chance. There is, if it was possible to calculate probabilities in negative numbers,
That's right. We're not going to run out of water.
it will never happen.
Right. Now, their argument is, well, we're going to run out of fresh water. No, because you can always make more. You can go to the oceans, and whether if you want to use it from Canadian point of view, you've got 3 oceans to draw from. One of them more difficult than the other 2, but you could do it. And all these places, let's say I've been spending some time out on the West Coast. Take any inlet you want along the BC coastline, put a desalination plant in there, and if you can build thousands of miles of pipeline to move oil, surely you can build pipelines to move fresh water.
And who could argue against pipelines, the environmental damage that would ensue by building a pipeline to move fresh water inland from the coast?
Good luck fighting that.
I mean,
but so this is what leads to people to think, well, obviously it's not about the water. It's about the control that controlling water brings.
I don't know.
I'm just saying this. Yeah. I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just saying this is what causes this kind of thinking.
Yeah.
Because these people, these jet sets who live 30,000 feet above the rest of us, they seem to have this view of the planet that, first of all, it's really fragile. It's like an empty eggshell. And if we don't handle it exactly right, it's going to crush, and we're going to crush it, and that'll be it. We'll all die, which is utter nonsense. I mean, ask the people in Pompeii about the frailty of Earth. Okay, ask the people who went through the 1906 earthquake in Galveston, Texas. All right. They're not going to tell you how fragile the earth is. They're going to tell you how fragile we are. I'm kind of paraphrasing George Carlin's famous line. The earth is not in trouble. We are. And absolutely, I couldn't agree with him. I mean, he was I'll agree with that statement. Let me leave it at that. So when you look at this, and if you don't laugh at it, you're going to beat your head against the wall, because the answer is so obvious. Just take the water, strain the salt and minerals out of it, and put it back. You can either dump it into a river, you can put it into a dam, you can pump it right to the site where you want it, such as a city, and use it as your water supply. There is no reason on earth for any country to be without water.
Yeah, I agree, Nick. It's and water is just one example of the stupidity that's going on, and that, let's call it that. Let's call it
That's
what
what
it
it
is. This
is.
is my campaign against euphemisms. Okay, there's no conspiracy here. This is just stupid people acting stupidly. This is people who, and even on our side, the people on our side of these arguments that think that this is all some sort of a big conspiracy, they're kind of trapped in this enlightenment idea that human beings are these rational beings, and of course we're rational. We have the ability to use our reason, okay, but our reason also is quite fallible, and there's no guarantee that we're actually going to use our reason and think things through anyway. And I think that's the problem here. The problem here is that we've reverted back to being human beings. Oh, it turns out that Hume and all of those guys were wrong. All right. It turns out they were wrong. We aren't computers. We're human
Well,
beings. We're perfectly capable of noble behavior. We're perfectly capable of reasoning things through. But for whatever reason, we don't. And
in a
that's
lot
what
of
we're
cases,
faced with now.
yeah.
We're faced with people who are in political power, who have an idea in their head. They're not sufficiently educated to understand when things that they're being fed by pseudoscientists are mistaken. So they're gullible. They just go along with it. And you know, we this is not one of the topics that we had discussed talking about tonight, Nick. But I'm just, as I'm surveying the news this afternoon or this evening, I'm seeing that the Russians now are talking about stationing tactical nuclear missiles in Belarus. Okay, and I'm asking myself, when are all of those do-gooders going to realize that their approach to the whole Ukrainian war, and these are the same people that want us to stop driving gas-powered cars because we're causing a drought in Somalia, and couldn't care less about whether or not we have the capability of providing water to Somalia. Oh, no, we wouldn't want to do that. Same people, same people. We have to fight the Russians in the Ukraine. Okay, I mean, you and I both know, Nick, I'm not defending the Russians, but I'm saying, can we just hit the pause button a little bit? Can we stop with the escalation, with the rhetoric? This idea that we're going to issue an arrest warrant now for the president of Russia? Oh, come on, guys. It's during the election campaign that we fought this past fall, I was in a public meeting and I was listening to some of the other candidates talking and that. And finally, when it came my turn to talk, I stood up and I said, I have to tell you, some mornings I wake up and I think I'm in a Harry Potter movie.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true.
And it's funny. Just let me tell you this: everybody in the crowd thought that was funny. What they didn't
Except,
get was I was referring to them.
but you mentioned education, and I want to come back to that because
Right.
I was a guest on a podcast just a few hours ago, and we got talking about some of this stuff. And I said the reason why people, normally intelligent people, who, when I say that, it's the royal, put the royal caveat on it, are so easily led astray is there's several reasons. Number one, our education system is not training them for critical thinking. They don't have the ability or the skill to be able to dissect what they're told and look at it based on certain fundamental truths. Okay. And I don't mean, I'm talking about scientific stuff you learn in high school, in grade school, like in biology, like carbon dioxide gas is plant food. Okay. If they don't have a rudimentary understanding, they don't have to be scientists, but they have to have some kind of understanding of science so that when people tell them this stuff, they go, wait a minute, that doesn't seem to make much sense. Explain this to me again, and put the guy who's telling them that on the hot seat and make sure his argument is linear and makes sense. So there's that. They're economically overwhelmed. So because of that, they don't have the time or the mental energy it takes to stay on top of everything that's going on. And under that cloak, a lot of this garbage gets passed and gets past the average person. So they're very easily that, like, when they hear, oh my God, we're running out of water. Nobody ever takes Google Maps, zooms out over Canada, look down and say, are we really? Are you kidding? In Ontario, there's over 10,000 lakes just in Ontario. And that's only one province. Go across the Hudson Bay to Quebec and look at it and tell me we're running out of water. And even if we were, we could desalt the water that we have on either coast. We could purify the water in the Great Lakes, which we do. That's where most people get their drinking water from in this country because they live in Ontario around the Great Lakes.
Right.
Where do you think the water comes from? We have the ability to take unpotable water and make it potable. And if we can do it, we can export that idea.
Yeah.
But nobody ever stops to think that stuff.
And for the love of Pete, I was trying to keep my language clean here.
I know.
Why would the government of California be talking about trying to find ways to buy fresh water for British Columbia and ship it down? It boggles the mind, Nick.
Well, look
Here
at
we
who's
are in
running
Ottawa.
California.
Here we are in Ottawa, yeah, because it's California. Here we are in Ottawa, where the government of Ottawa, just for the city itself, is planning on spending somewhere close to $60 billion building wind turbines and a large, I think it's 36 square kilometers of solar panels to possibly provide enough electricity on a stable basis for Ottawa to operate by the year 2050. Okay.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck with that. But I'm thinking $60 billion? How many desalinization plants can they build in California with $60 billion and not have a drought problem? Not have a problem. Remember, the drought is not about people in California. And by the way, they're not suffering from a drought right now. They're suffering from too much rain.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Okay. Yeah. But when they were having the drought problem, it wasn't affecting people in that they were dying of thirst or they weren't getting enough water. It was affecting agriculture. And of course, that ties into the whole idea of escalating food prices.
Yeah.
So it's when it comes down to it, so much of the difficulty that we're experiencing, whether it's making ends meet, whether it's the way that our cities are planned, all of this stuff comes down to poor management. It's poor management. It's poor political management. It's poor public management. And I'm not saying that the answer is get better managers. I'm actually saying the answer is have fewer managers, have a little bit less management, and allow common sense people to manage their own affairs to the greatest extent possible, consistent with having some sort of a community. And you know what? Common sense people, they're going to come up with common sense solutions. Like, if I need water, I'll find a way, if we have to come together and figure out how to desalinize ocean water, okay, then we'll do it.
Yes. And this is why, well, first of all, again, I go back to who's running California. It's a Democrat, it's a blue state. And it's, let's face it, the people running that state are out of their minds. They're driving people out of that state in droves, absolute droves. So you've got places like San Diego who have been turned into an outdoor toilet. You've got homelessness running rampant. You've got $1 million outhouse in San Diego so people don't have to crap in the streets. Well, guess what? $1 million for one outhouse? Are you out of your mind? I could slap up an outhouse for $1,500 if that's what you wanted. It wouldn't cost $1 million. So this is the kind of mentality. So to hear about them wanting to buy water from BC doesn't surprise me, as stupid an idea as that is. I mean, look, if they had a desalination plant, would the Hoover Dam, Lake Mead behind the Hoover Dam be going dry? They could
Well,
pump water over
they
the
could
mountains
they could
right into it.
they could refill that
That's my
lake.
point. There's no reason for Lake Mead to go dry.
Hmm.
But because they don't know their foot from a hole in the ground, then this is what happens. You get incompetent people in charge of things that take great responsibility and competence to run.
And with that, we're going to go for a break. So stick with us. We'll be back in a couple of minutes here on the Nick and Joe Show.
Ice cream. Give me ice cream with whipped cream. Ice cream. Give me ice cream with whipped cream. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. That strawberry chocolate taste. High school vanilla for me. Hundreds and thousands. I need an ice cream island. Give me ice cream with whipped cream. Strawberry sauce. And see my face gleam. I need a wafer on top. Just ice cream full stop. So take me to the pudding shop. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. That strawberry chocolate taste.
There is just a feeling that this might be right for us, for you and me. There is just a look, I think this might be right for us, for you and me. There is just a feeling that this might be right for us, for you and me. There is just a look, I think this might.
All right, welcome back, folks. It's the Nick and Joe Show. I'm Nick. I almost said I'm Joe. He's Nick. That would be an intro.
You haven't made that mistake in a long time.
No, that's true. We haven't. I just want to mention a couple of things that are in the chat room right now. First of all, I love our chat room. I really do. They have some conversations in there. But
Yeah.
Kurt pointed out. Sorry.
So just to clarify, Nick, for our listeners and our viewers, what happens is because people are watching or listening to us on different platforms.
Right.
But what we're able to do is we're able to, when you make a comment, if you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Facebook Live, when you make a comment and post it, it shows up in our chat room. So it's
Right.
not like if you're going around looking for a chat room, you won't find it. But if
Oh,
you
yeah,
make
I'm
a
glad you pointed
comment
that out.
in any of those platforms,
It shows
then
up
it
here.
aggregates in our chat room. We're able to see it.
Okay, well, Kirk pointed out. Let me find his comment. There it is. When I said Galveston went through a earthquake, apparently it was a hurricane, and he lists a few others that have afflicted different regions of North America over the last century or so. So I thought it was an earthquake. Turns out, according to Kirk, that it was actually a hurricane. The
Yep.
effect, I suppose, because it wiped it off the map. I mean,
The-
they were.
The,
It was a
the,
mess.
the 1906 earthquake
Was in San
it was a
Francisco.
famous earthquake. It was actually San Francisco.
Yes, but it's Galveston was the one I was thinking of because it's very low. It's on an island,
Right.
and it's in the Gulf of Mexico, and it got just washed away. It just was gone. So there's that. The other one I wanted to point out that Marin mentioned she's talking about her husband building an outhouse in the middle of a terrible storm. Because I was talking about I could slap an outhouse up in no time for $1,500. Her husband did it in the middle of a huge storm. So I just thought that was a kind of a cute point, kind of supporting what I was saying. You don't need to spend $1 million. You need a little bit of desperation and a couple of sheets of plywood and a hammer and a handful of nails, and you can put on an outhouse up in no time. But this is just more of the socialistic insanity that rules our world these days. Now, one of the other things I want to bring up was this idea that, first of all, Joe Biden came to Ottawa and he made several faux pas. One was he cursed the Leafs, which is a bad idea. He should never do that. The other one, which was kind of funny, I will admit. And he was stumbling over something he was trying to say. Oh, he compared us to, he wanted to congratulate China. Oh, I mean Canada. So people jumped all over that. And it's self-inflicted.
Yeah, that wasn't a faux pas. That was probably a purposeful mistake, but
maybe, but it certainly gives the other team plenty of ammunition. And look, when I was watching a clip, saw a picture of Joe Biden sitting with, or standing with our prime minister, I thought, oh, look, Dumb and Dumber. You pick who's who. It's just, I couldn't help it because neither one of these guys should be taken seriously from the point of view of being an effective world leader. They're just, both of them are disasters. Anyway, but what did come out of this was an American request for us to take on more of a role in Haiti. So Trudeau decided he was going to donate another $100 million to Haiti to help deal with the rampant crime. I mean, Haiti is a hellhole. And if people don't know the history of how it got to where it is today, first of all, there was a group called the Clinton Foundation that was supposed to manage the money that was being poured in by people all over the world to try to help Haiti get back on its feet. One of the questions I would have asked is, where did all that money go? I mean, we left it to Bill and Hillary and it's gone. And now we have this disaster that we have to spend even more money cleaning up. They have put enough money into Haiti since the earthquake. What's that, 10 years ago now?
2010.
All right, 22 years ago, 23 years ago.
No, 13.
So, I'm sorry. Yes, I've got good math skills. They just don't work very well. Anyway, so in that 13 years, we have poured tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars into it. And for what good? We now have gangs running half the island. They're the de facto law of the land. There's corruption all over the place. And this money was supposed to fix all that. So where do we draw the line and say, wait a minute, there's something wrong here? Because from where I stand, you either back off and say, let the Haitians sort it out. We've been pouring all kinds of money and resources into it. And for some reason, they can't seem to get things put together and rebuild, because they never were a really strong economy anyway. I don't know if they were really democratic. I think Haiti's had a long history of corruption within whatever democratic process they have. But if they can't fix it and they know what's going on the ground, how are we supposed to? So we either pull back or we get a group together and we militarily invade them, wipe the slate clean, throw out all the leadership, and do what we did in Germany and Japan after the end of World War II. And unless we're willing to do that, and I don't know any politician who wants to do that, then we got to stop throwing good money after bad.
So a few responses to a few of the different points that you made, starting with Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden being weak leaders. And as you said that, Nick, I couldn't help but think that you and I came of age in an era of giants when it came to international leadership. Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, Pope John Paul II.
Right.
Three that immediately come to mind. And listen, I have to say, even in those days, Pierre Trudeau for a while didn't agree with his politics, but this was compared to his son,
Oh
head and
yeah.
shoulders.
Oh
No
yeah.
comparison is
Brian
possible.
Mulroney, whether you
Brian
like him or not.
Mulroney, the list goes on. And these people tackled some very real issues. Ironically, we now live in an era of pygmies.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. And maybe it's cyclical. I don't know. But it's quite unfortunate because I think that what we're suffering from, and it's not just Canada, it's not just the United States, just throughout the Western world, we're just suffering from an absence of leadership, an absence of courage, an absence of character and principle. And you see it in virtually everything now. With respect to Haiti, 13 years since that earthquake. And we haven't just spent in Haiti, or we haven't spent, perhaps I should be saying, we have collected in order to help the Haitians, not tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, but billions of dollars.
Just
Where
makes
is
my
all that
case.
money gone?
It's a
I
very
don't
good
know.
question.
I just don't know. What I do know is this. If you've ever seen the movie Escape from New York,
Hmm.
if you haven't, and you want to know what it's like in Haiti now, in the capital city of Haiti, Port-au-Prince, watch the movie Escape from New York. And that'll give you a pretty good idea of what it's like in that troubled city. You want to
It
help
is.
you want to help Haiti? You want to help the citizens of Haiti, the innocent men, women, and children who are suffering every day? Invade the country.
Yeah, I
Invade the
didn't think I was
country.
being over the top with that, by the way.
I'm sorry?
I didn't think I was being,
No,
outrageous by
I don't
saying
think
that.
you're. It is the solution. Invade the country, occupy it, impose law and order, clean things up, establish a functional administrative government, and then get the hell out.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
that's
You're
the way to
absolutely
do
right.
it.
Because
Nobody
what?
has the stomach to do that right now, though, Nick. And worst of all, is at least so far as Canada is concerned, we simply don't have the capacity to do it.
Well, first, let
So
me.
what do we do, just to finish the thought, Nick? I know
Yeah.
you. Okay. So what does our government do? What it always does: promises money. Hey, we're donating $100 million. Give ourselves a pat on the back. Except it's not Justin Trudeau's money that's getting thrown down the toilet here, flushed down the toilet. It's my money and it's your money, because the government doesn't have money. It's taxpayers' money.
Yeah. So to just as far as what we could do and what we can't do, we're doubling the size of our presence in Latvia. We just sent half the
Militarily,
armored.
right.
Yes, I'm talking about a military point of view, because they wanted to put Canadian boots on the ground. The Americans did. On top of that, we have the hundreds of millions of dollars going in equipment and personnel to Ukraine, a war that some news outlets are labeling a border war between Ukraine and Russia. And you know what? I'm finding it hard to argue with that, because Ukraine was not a glowing democracy like you and I have talked about before. There's a lot going on. I don't want to get into that right now, but we are upping our support for that, and we're denuding our military here at home. So even if we wanted to, who would we send, and with what would they take with them? Okay, you've already, because you can't send the whole army. You have to rotate guys. Our army is too small for that. We're not the American military with 2 or 3 million men under arms. We've got 60 or 70,000 people in uniform, and of that, only about 2,000 actually carry rifles with pointy sticks on the end. So once you've got them in Latvia and in Ukraine, and you need to keep some at home for training and turn around and give them a chance to refresh and reboot and retrain, who are you going to send to Haiti? There is nobody, because we've stripped ourselves of our ability to be an effective force, even in a medium power sense, because of poor procurement. And I'm not going to lay this just at the feet of the Liberals, although they bear the lion's share because they were the lion's share of our governance over our history. They have treated the military like a toy up on a shelf, and they have also, they take it down when they need it, they dust off, and then they put it back. So I'll end
Let's
it
take
there.
a break.
And we need to, that's what I'm trying to say. We need to take a break. So
Nick needs a short break to collect his thoughts. We'll be
I got
back in a
lots of
minute here on
thoughts.
the Nick and Joe Show. Don't go away.
All right.
We all know that climate change is real. But with countries like China and India failing to do their part, what Canadians need now more than ever is a Made in Canada climate change plan. A real plan that responds to the real-world needs of Canadians. A balanced plan that supports responsible economic growth and strengthens our essential infrastructure. A responsible plan that protects our natural environment and ensures that all Canadians enjoy the blessings of clean air, clean land, and clean water for generations to come. It's time for Canadian politicians to show real leadership in the world, putting partisanship and ideology aside. It's time for a sensible climate plan. We're the International Climate Science Coalition Canada, and we're ready to help. To learn more, visit our website, icsc-canada.com.
And we're back.
You caught me typing.
Nick was collecting his thoughts.
I was thinking, excuse me. Okay, so in a nutshell, if I can wrap up that segment, we're our military, and as much as I love our military and our men at arms, and I'm a big promoter of those guys, we're a token force. We really are. Our Air Force is too small. Our Army, no matter how well trained they are, is very much like the who are the people that guard the Pope? Swiss
Guards.
Okay, you wouldn't ever want to take one on. Okay, these are some of the best soldiers in the world, but I wouldn't count on them to counter an invasion of any kind in Italy or something like that. There's just not enough of them, and
Well,
that's what we've been reduced to.
This is virtue signaling on steroids.
Oh yeah,
This is-
absolutely.
First of all, the President of the United States takes 2 years to come to Canada, says some nice things about how we are Canada's closest ally. And I'm thinking to myself, we're your closest ally and it took you 2 years to come up here? And we're your closest ally, but somehow or other you forgot to include us or to insist on including us in the new
Five Eye deal.
Australia, UK,
the Five Eye.
U.S. security arrangement, given the fact that we actually have an integrated air defense system in North America, you would think that we would be at the table. And I'm quite certain that our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, didn't insist on us being at that table if he even knew it was happening.
Well, he's got to care about the table, first of all.
Okay.
And secondly, it used to be that when a president was elected, the first place he'd visit
Of
is
course.
Canada,
And-
not the last.
Okay. So, but as with all weak people, I believe that Justin Trudeau succumbed to the flattery. He liked the
Yeah.
fact that the president of the United States came up here, did some photo ops with him, told him how wonderful a prime minister he is, how great a country Canada is. And we all like hearing good things about us from our big brothers, okay? But at some point in time, you have to live in the real world the way it really is.
Yeah.
And I cannot escape the feeling that Mr. Trudeau succumbed to flattery when it came to this particular request. Now, he knows, he has to know, because his chief of defense staff has been saying publicly, I don't think we could do a Haiti mission. Ever since people started talking about Haiti, all right, the head of the military has been out in public before his government even makes a decision saying, oh, well, we can't really do that.
Yeah. I read an article to that effect today, along the same lines,
Right.
where I forget his name. Is it Vor or something like that? The CDS. I can't remember his name. Anyway, the point is, you're right. The other thing that about all this is there may have been some back channel negotiation about bringing the president to Canada at this particular time, because let's face it, Joe Biden probably couldn't find Toronto on a map.
Well, not anymore.
Well, I don't think at the best of times he could have found it. He had no interest in this country. And even though we are their biggest trading partners and we've had the longest peaceful coexistence in modern history, along with the longest defended undefended border, blah, blah, blah. But here's, just run this through the grist mill. Is it at least conceivable that the phone call that was made to start this arrangement originated in Ottawa, not Washington, and that Justin was on the other end saying, you know something, it'd be really good right now if the president came up here and we made it look like we were getting things done, like the closing of Roxham Road. That's been that way under his watch since the day he took over. All of a sudden, the president shows up and bam, they close it. Why didn't they do this 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago?
Why do we need the Americans to do anything? It's our border.
I guess that's what I'm saying. We didn't need the American president to do it. If you want to use the military for anything, use it to seal your border. Take that burden off the RCMP, put the second Princess Bats down there and say, sorry, you're not coming in. You're going to go through regular channels like everybody else.
Look, Nick, when I refer to pygmies on the international scene, the poster children for these pygmies are Justin
These two
Trudeau
guys.
and Joe Biden.
That's
I don't
why
think the leadership in any Western nation today is anywhere on par with what we experienced when we were growing up. And I'm not just saying that nostalgically. I think objectively it's true.
Well, there's certainly no Churchills, there's no Thatchers, and there's no Stephen Harpers out there. That's for sure.
Even Stephen Harper
Was a lot better by far. He was a real statesman, and certainly he played to Canada's strengths. Like, he didn't try to oversell us. He didn't try to say, we're as powerful as the U.S. is, or any silly thing like that. But he was not afraid to take a Canadian stance, independent of the Americans, on the world stage.
But a point that I really want to go back to, and I want to emphasize, is this whole thing about the $100 million.
Oh God, yeah.
Okay, we're pledging $100 million to beef up security. There is no security to beef up. There is no law and order in Haiti today. Throwing more money at the problem is not going to solve the problem. But
they haven't even been able. Excuse me, let me interrupt just for a second. They haven't even been able to deliver on some of the promises they've already made.
Right.
The Haitian police are still waiting for bulletproof vests promised by the Canadian government. If they can't get a cargo ship to take down, how many would you need? 2,000? And pack them in a container and send them down to Haiti, which is by sea. Let's give it 5 whole days. You could have had it there months ago. What are they still waiting on? If they can't do that, what good is another $100 million?
Well, and here's the thing to remember, okay? It's $100 million of my dollars and your dollars. At a time when Canadian families are having difficulty making ends meet.
Putting food on the table.
Why are we spending more money? If we can afford to give $100 million to this failed project, $100 million of virtue signaling, how about we look after Canadians first? And we say, I feel bad for those guys in Haiti. I know what needs to be done, but nobody else wants to do it, and we don't have the ability to do it. So we're going to return that $100 million that we know is out there. We'll just cut taxes by $100 million. But of course, it's never going to happen.
No, of course not.
And this is the tragedy of it. The tragedy is we're suffering from not just poor leadership, but poor sense of priorities,
Well, that's all.
ignorance, lack of education, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. It's
But
enough to
that's
make
all.
a person despair.
That's all based on poor priorities. Everything you just said, could be rectified if the government, and I'm using the royal word government because it's at all levels, regardless of political stripe, if they stop making political decisions based on what's good for them instead of the public they're supposed to serve, things would be dramatically different. But you're right, it's not going to happen because too many people have been beaten to sleep with apathy. What difference does it make? These guys do whatever they want to do. Well, whose fault is that? Ultimately, that's ours because we keep electing them.
The funny thing about Haiti, and I hate to say this, is that I suspect that most people in Canada don't even know where Haiti is. They could never find it on a map.
Well, it's right there at the end of the Suez Canal, is it not?
Okay, no, you should not believe that, ladies and gentlemen.
And I
He's
don't
just
believe
being
it either.
sarcastic.
Everybody knows it's an island in the Mediterranean.
Half an island. That's the other thing about this is
How
that
does that work?
it's only half of it. Haiti is half of the island. The
It's
other
in the
half of the
Caribbean,
island
by
is
the way.
Huh?
It's in the Caribbean, by the way.
It is,
For
yes.
anyone who is thinking he really doesn't know where it is. Yeah, I know where it is.
Yeah, no, Nick knows where Haiti is. He's sailed enough around Haiti
Yeah, that's right.
in the general vicinity.
I've been down there often enough. I know where Haiti is. But how does that happen? You've got one half of the island. What's the other side? The Dominican Republic,
Dominican Republic.
which is it's certainly no first world country in and of itself, but it does not have the problems that Haiti has.
It's a
anywhere near
destination
close.
place for
My daughter just came back from there.
tourists.
She went down there with her school to help some of the communities that are down there, the poor communities,
Right.
and build infrastructure and just kind of lend a hand. It's something they do every 2 years out of that school. And I've had two daughters go down there and do that now, spend time down there. They were down there for 10 days and got a real dose of Caribbean culture and showed them a little bit about
And-
what it's like in Canada and worked together on different projects down there. You
And
can't
they
do
get-
that in Haiti.
And the interesting thing about that is that I think is actually a good thing is that they actually get to experience, to see firsthand what real poverty is.
That's right.
Okay. I have not been to the Dominican Republic for many years, but the last time I was there, I tell a story about how the government had decided that they wanted to, the old story of having a chicken in every pot. Well, the government had a program to ensure that people had televisions. They wanted every home to have a television. So you could drive down the road and people were literally living in corrugated metal shacks,
Right.
okay, with no proper doors. A blanket is a door, and living on the ground. But they still had electricity and they still had their television sets. Anyway, it gives you a different perspective. When you think about, you complain about Canada and you complain about poverty, and we're going to get into some of that discussion after the break. But we don't have real poverty in Canada. The poorest of the poor in Canada have a standard of living beyond the imagination of a whole lot of people living in the Dominican Republic. Forget about Haiti. The difference between Haiti and the Dominican Republic is that there's law and order in Haiti. Okay, and
Yeah, the question now is why? Why is he in Haiti but not in the DR?
I'm sorry, in the Dominican Republic there's law and order.
Yeah,
We
I
don't
knew
have
you
it in
meant.
Haiti.
Right. So why in one but not the other?
Nick, there is the $64,000 question. I cannot answer that. And maybe it just comes down to the fact that people obey the law. They have a sense of dignity that is lacking right now in Haiti amongst the people who are in power, which are the criminal gangs. And,
All right.
as we've already said repeatedly, and at the risk of being accused of repeating ourselves, Nick, the thing in Haiti that has to be done is you have to have a military operation. You have to go in with sufficient military force to pacify the population, get rid of the gangs, okay, and impose, if it requires, impose martial law for a period of time, impose law and order, impose or create a solid administration. It may take a year, it may take 2 years, but that's what they need. And if you're not going to do that, don't waste my money. It's
Yeah.
period.
All right.
Got to go
With
for a
that-
break.
There you got it. Let's take a break and we'll be back with more with the Nick and Joe show right after this. I love that welcome back screen, Joseph.
like that?
It reminds me of the Jetsons right out of the 60s.
Well, you know where I got the idea from when we were setting up the graphics for the show
Right.
was the Johnny Carson show. If you ever watched Johnny Carson, when they would go for a break and they would come back, they had these drawings and that, and it was so low tech.
Yeah.
And of course, back in those days, it was low tech anyway, relatively speaking,
Yeah.
right? But
Magnetic tape and cameras. Yeah.
well, worse than that, or rather than teleprompters, when he did his jokes, his monologue,
Yeah.
it was all written out on cue cards,
Right.
and there'd be somebody standing up by the cameras
stage.
holding
Yeah.
up these cue cards, and he'd read the jokes off of the cue cards.
Yeah, we've come a long way since then.
We have.
When I was
Absolutely.
doing the interview today, we were talking about how we're talking about the blend of technology with blue collar and that kind of stuff. When I mentioned the show, the Jetsons, well, the interviewer is a younger man than I am, and had no idea, had never heard of the Jetsons. And I said, it was the Jetsons. Look it up. It was set back in the 1960s, and the year that it was created, the 1960s, but the year that the show was supposed to be set in was the year 2000. And
Was it
I
supposed to
said,
be 2000?
I believe it was.
Wow.
I'd have to look that up again, but I'm 90% sure it was.
Well,
So, in other
you're doing,
words,
you know what you're doing, Nick? You're doing it to me again. We're just getting. I'm on my leash. I'm tugging on my leash because I just want to go down this. I want to go down this rabbit hole.
okay.
So space. Don't forget that Space 1999.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, I
where
remember that
there
very
was
well.
supposed to be a nuclear explosion on the
Moonbase
moon
Alpha.
to knock the moon out of the Earth's orbit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And here's a show that was made in the early 1970s.
Yes.
It called UFO.
Oh,
Now,
I thought you were
if
talking about Moonbase Alpha.
I believe it was Moonbase Alpha. Now that you mention it,
That's
yeah. So very few people remember that show. It's a British show. I think it's BBC or it might be ITV. I'm not sure. But if you can look it up on YouTube. The show's name is UFO, and
okay.
it's not the American UFO Files or anything like
No,
that.
no,
Okay.
no. This one had Martin Landau in it as the
No, that
captain.
was Space 1999.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes. You're right. You're right.
This is well before Space 1999,
Oh, okay.
and it's about this surreptitious war going on between the aliens, although
Uh-huh.
we're never sure where they come from,
Right.
and Earth. It's a secret war going on. Anyway, it's UFO, and it's supposed to have taken place in the future in 1980.
In the future. It's funny because when we were talking about the Jetsons, I said a lot of things that were so futuristic during the settings, like having a mechanical maid, flying cars, things like that. A lot of that has come true. Like, okay, the maid doesn't look like a robot in a French maid outfit. It's a little thing that runs around the floor.
Uh, okay, but
Nothing.
Nick, you're only saying that because you have not yet been served at a restaurant
Oh, I
by a
forgot about
robot
those
waiter.
things. I forgot about those things. But we now are on the literally on the verge of flying cars. They figured out how to make them work, and it was all due to microprocessing to control the speed of the engines on the four corners of the car to make sure they all ran at the same speed, so they didn't do this when they're trying to fly, which was a big problem with them up until recently. And
First
now they're
world
trying to bring the cost down.
first world problems.
Absolutely first world
But
problems. But you know what? First world problems sometimes turn and trickle down into the second and third world. Like look at cell phones.
well, look, I will say this, Nick. It's fascinating to go back 30, 40, even 50 years and see what their idea of the future looked like. And especially
Sometimes you
given
got
the
it
fact
right.
that their idea of the future was already 40 years ago.
Well, take Star Trek, the tricorder. What is that if not a cell phone? It can do everything the tricorder could do.
Well,
You know,
nowadays almost it can take your blood pressure, your heart rate, and everything
that's
like
what
that.
I mean.
Yeah,
The tricorder was this generic instrument that did everything.
yeah.
Well, a cell phone. They are even working on teleportation. There are scientists out there right now who are working with plant matter and have been able to move molecules. Now,
I
very, very small distances. We're not talking like beaming a whole human being to the surface of a planet.
let me
Go ahead.
explain to you something, Nick. You will never get me to use that system if it ever.
I'll take the landing craft, please.
Thank you. I will be like Dr. McCoy.
Absolutely. I am not going to have my particles scattered
You're
all
not.
over the universe.
Yeah, you're not getting me. You're not scattering my particles around.
You know what? There's probably a lot of common sense in that. But the point is, they're moving in that direction.
Right.
They're working on hyperdrive. They go beyond the speed of light. They're working with wormholes. All these different things that were at the time so futuristic that nobody ever thought we'd ever achieve them, and yet here we are.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about. I know.
No, let's just delve into this because I think it's an important topic, and I did mention before the break that we would talk a little bit
into
about
this.
this, and that's the whole area of poverty.
Yeah.
There's an organization called the Canadian Centre for Policy Studies,
Yes.
which has provincial branches. So the organization, the Canadian Centre for Policy Studies Nova Scotia branch, conducted a study and issued a report recently. And the report talks about how government benefits that were handed out in Nova Scotia by the Nova Scotia government in response to COVID-19, and not just the Nova Scotia government, but the federal government as well,
Right.
that these benefits resulted in a reduction in the rate of child poverty by almost 25%. So let me just say that again. Government benefits, according to the Centre for Policy Alternatives in Nova Scotia, in the year 2020, were responsible for reducing child poverty in that province by almost 25%. Now, before unpacking that, let's make the observation that we made before the last commercial break, and that is that Canadians don't really know real poverty. The poorest of the poor in this country, and I mean the poorest of the poor, I'm not talking about people living on the street because of mental illness and stuff like that. That's a different category altogether. I'm just talking about people who are experiencing poverty. Okay? They are at a level of a standard of living in Canada that is beyond the imagination of the majority of people in this world. So let's remember and have some perspective when we're talking about poverty. Okay. But here's the real problem with that particular report and its conclusions. I don't doubt that government handouts, not just in Nova Scotia, but everywhere across the country, increased the incomes of, let's call it the lowest of our economic people who are at the lower economic strata in this country. I think that's probably absolutely true. It certainly seems to be true in Nova Scotia if this report's to be believed. Okay, so I'm not taking issue with that. What I'm taking issue with is the characterization that this report uses for those families who, quote unquote, saw the children raised out of poverty. Somehow we've lost sight of the fact that if you're getting handouts, whether you're getting handouts from the United Way or from your local church or synagogue or mosque or from your neighbor or from other people in your family, or they're coming from the government through taxation, handouts are handouts. So in fact, just because the government, the standard of living of these children increased to the point where, or I shouldn't say the standard of living, let's say the income increased so that the income in their families was above the low income cutoff or whatever the standard they're using to determine what is and is not poverty, just because their income was now above that doesn't mean that they're not living in poverty. The very fact that they're depending on handouts, on what is essentially charity, even if it comes from the government, they're still living in poverty. So it's a twisting of the language where we give ourselves a pat on the back again, and we're saying we've eliminated poverty. You haven't eliminated poverty. Okay, you've given them a better standard of living, no question about that. But you haven't eliminated poverty for a single child because they are continuing to live on charity.
Yep.
And so you increase the amount of charitable dollars that are going to them. Now, I know that makes a lot of people very uncomfortable when we talk about tax dollars and government benefits being charity, but let's face facts, that's what it is. Nick, we have to take another quick break. We spent too much time talking about the Jetsons.
I know we can come back with this.
Yeah, very short break. We'll get back into this when we come back. Who says you can't turn the clock back? Experience the excitement of open-air flying and see Canada's national capital region like you've never seen it before from the open cockpit of a vintage 1930s biplane. Are you up for the adventure? Put on your helmet and goggles and strap yourself in. Book your flight today. Go to OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. That's OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. Ottawa Biplane Adventures. The adventure begins here.
Oh my gosh, that was so exciting! I gotta do it again.
And we are back.
Yes, we are. And I'm paying attention too, really.
No, I knew you were, Nick. I was just, I was looking at you as opposed to looking at my camera.
Oh,
So
there you go.
I was looking at you in the screen rather than looking at you in the camera.
Yeah,
So
well,
look, getting back to what I'm saying again, just to reiterate the point, Nick, is that we somehow we have gotten to the point where people who are receiving benefits from the government because they're having difficulty making ends meet. And I'm not criticizing them. This is not meant to be in any way, shape, or form a derogation, a deprecation, or anything of these people. I'm not saying that, okay? I'm not questioning people's need here. Is it possible that people don't need? Is it possible that some people scam the system? All of that's possible, but that's not the subject here of what I'm focusing on. What I'm focusing on is the terminology and the belief, the perception that if we're getting the handout from the government as opposed to from our local church or community group, whatever it is, Lions Club, Kiwanis, that somehow or other it's not charity, but in fact it is charity. And I don't want to be insulting to people. I don't want them to think that, oh, he's putting us down. I'm not. But it is charity. So in effect, we haven't raised a single person out of poverty with government benefits. Government benefits do not raise people out of poverty. Jobs where people are earning an income and the income that they're earning is sufficient for them to make ends meet, that's how you raise people out of poverty. You don't raise people out of poverty through government programs that hand out money. And again, it may be important for us to do that, but it's not raising people out of poverty. Raising people out of poverty requires us to ensure that they have good paying jobs, that they're able to look after themselves without being dependent on taxpayers or their neighbors or their family for income.
I think that one of the things about handouts from the state specifically is what happens when that money runs out. Because if you're giving them a handout, it's a lump of money or a lump of benefits that you can draw on for a given time. And if it runs out, I'm thinking of unemployment insurance, the COVID benefit. What happens once that expires? Now you have to go back to the government and find another way, because the longer you go without, when you're in your working prime, the longer you go between jobs, the harder it is to find a job or start your own, either way. For an individual to be able to do that gap, the longer, the wider that gap is, the longer a ladder you need to get to bridge it. So you create a class of dependency. We see this in northern communities. We see this in the working poor. That's an interesting phrase. All kinds of different groups become dependent on the state for their not only their livelihoods but for their very existence, and that creates people who the logic, as I understand it, the logic that comes from the government behind that is this is how we create voters we can count on, because you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. So the more people we're feeding, the less likely we are to get bitten at the ballot box, because it doesn't matter whether our policies are sound or not. People want that check, and they're going to make sure we stay in power, because we'll tell them the other guy will take that away. And the other guy, no matter what he says, has to fight an uphill battle, because he has to overcome that fear first before they'll listen to him. And a lot of people, especially in the last 5 or 10 years, are far too afraid of change to be able to take a chance on the new kid on the block. And that's one of the reasons why our current leadership is still in office, because you have COVID, you have all these benefits that are flowing out the door like a river and going to people, and they say, well, I don't like Justin Trudeau, but if I don't vote for him, and they may not articulate it this way, but that underneath there's that undercurrent of, I don't want to threaten the status quo because it might not be perfect, but I'm comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with this level of misery. And that is so tragic, because that should be the last thing any decent government wants, is to create a dependency class by taking away opportunities. And again, I go back to EI and I go back to different programs, say the Ontario one with ODSP. If you start to make too much money, they begin to claw it back. So you really can't get ahead. So this is how governments do that to stay in power. And it's a disgusting thing to think about. And as much as this is why, part of the reason why they don't care if they don't lift anybody out of poverty, they're counting on them not to realize that, and to just look at the mailbox and say, XYZ government, put that check in there, and I'm going to support that because I want that check.
Well, Nick, you're far more cynical than I am when it comes to this. Where you see a conspiracy, I just see poor thought, poor planning, poor prioritization. The number of times I've read a government report and internal documents where people who are involved in a particular program that involves handing money out to voters, they go, look, we've reached 35% more, to pull a number out of the air, people with this particular benefit than we did last year. We're doing a great job. And I always felt, and whenever something like that would cross my desk, I always reacted with, no, that doesn't mean we're doing a good job. It means we're doing a piss poor job.
Exactly.
The more we're able to help people, that is to say, the more people that we have to help, the worse the job we're doing as a government. But somehow or other, we've inverted that. Somehow or other, we've reached a point in time where the more the government does, the more they give themselves a pat on the back. The more we give them a pat on the back because they're doing such a great job.
Well, I guess
the real world doesn't work that way.
But our governments don't seem to work very well in the real world. They work in their own bubble. And when you have something like this, and you're right, I am more cynical than you are, because when I look at it, I look at cause and effect. And if I can think that way, the brainiacs up in Ottawa or in Queen's Park or in any other legislative assembly you want to mention, think about this. They got to think the same thing. Only they take it and they it's very malleable. They can work it to suit their own ends. And I do not put it past them to take a program to work it towards their own ends and their own benefits. Because what's a politician's number one job? It's to get reelected.
Sure.
And that's why I'm cynical.
Well, I wouldn't say that it doesn't happen.
Neither would I.
Okay. but it's become a real problem. And I don't know who it was. I think it was Benjamin Franklin. I have to check this, but whoever it was said that democracy, this is in reference to the United States, American democracy, shortly after they adopted their
Revolution.
constitution, that democracy in the United States will only survive until people realize that they can vote themselves money.
Bingo.
And that's really what it comes down to. But again, the role of the government, I think, has to be to create an environment where the economy works, where jobs are created, and where people can earn a living. And then to encourage, because we're always going to have poverty, because poverty is relative, but we're always going to have people who are in need of assistance. Now, whether that assistance comes from community groups or it comes from, churches, religious institutions, or from friends and family, that's never going to go away. Part of the reason why the government has largely taken over the whole charitable industry, if I could use the term industry in relation to charities, is because they wanted to get rid of the quote-unquote stigma of receiving charity. And witnessing what this report talked about in Nova Scotia with child poverty, I'd say that they've succeeded in removing the stigma dramatically. It's
Yeah,
been a
no
great
kidding.
success. But has it been good for our society? Has it been good for our communities? Look, I'm not anti-welfare. And I have to say I'm not entirely, although I'm wary of government being the main source of welfare, the main source of charity, but I'm not against charitable giving, and I'm not against welfare.
We talked
But
about this before, though.
right,
We talked about the difference between social programs that we as a democratic society want to burden ourselves with to help our neighbors when they need it, versus socialism, which is simply control of the state over every aspect of your life. So I agree with you. I'm not anti-social programs per se, but because the government took it out of the hands of the service clubs and the religious institutions, yes, they did remove the stigma, but as you just pointed out, they did it so successfully that there is no stigma at all anymore. It used to be you only went to your neighbor and knocked on their door through these charities when you absolutely had to. And you only did it for as long as you absolutely had to. That's gone now. And I think that has been a big problem in our society. We don't understand that the money we're taking is coming from our neighbor, not the government, even if the government's the funnel that gives it to us.
right. And the other side of this is that it used to be when you were dealing with private charitable institutions or much more local programs,
Right.
it used to be that there were strings attached.
Hmm.
In other words, there were certain things that you had to do in order for people to feel that it was worth giving you charity. Now,
Well,
that
look
sounds like a very harsh thing to say,
How
but
successful was Michael Harris with Workfare?
I'm sorry?
Remember Michael Harris, the
Right,
Premier of
right,
Ontario,
with
and
Workfare. Right,
He brought the people down, the number of people on the welfare rolls down tremendously because he weeded out the lazy ones who didn't want to work.
well, okay, I mean, yeah, that's true, but the whole idea was that if you were going to receive welfare, you had to do something for
That's
the
what I'm driving
community
at.
in order to get it.
That's right.
So in essence, what he was doing was he was just it wasn't even really welfare. We called it workfare, but the reality was we were saying, look, we're going to give people a job and then we're going to pay them. The pay scale and the way that the pay was organized and distributed was through a welfare system, so to speak. But that was essentially what it was.
Yeah.
And look, that is, in my view, the highest form of charity, is to give people a job.
I couldn't
That's
agree
the
with you more,
highest form of charity.
because
It's
that
not to
restores
give
a
a
man's
handout to
dignity.
them. It's to say, look, we need this done. So come and I will do this for me, and I will pay you for it.
Well, that restores a man's dignity and his self-esteem, and those two things are suffering. We're suffering from a lack of that in a big way.
I think so. Nick, we're going to have to take another break, bottom of the hour, a little bit longer, about 2 minutes. So, ladies and gentlemen, stick with us. We'll be back here in a couple of minutes on the Nick and Joe Show. Don't go away, more to come.
All right, welcome back to the Nick and Joe Show, folks. We're coming to you. I'm in Sioux Lookout. He's in nation's capital, Ottawa. For our foreign listeners, that happens to be the country's capital, and it's also the coldest capital on the planet. So anyway, I was going to make a joke about global warming. We could certainly use some, but that's a topic for a different day. Another topic that I think is relevant to modern discussions of social affairs is this whole transgender thing. And based on a story I read earlier, I think the trans group, and I'm just going to call them that for the lack of a better term, uh, I think they've overplayed their hand. There has been a growing backlash against this kind of thing. And now the World Athletic Council has banned biological males who claim to be females in a male body uh, from participating in world level, elite level sports with women. They've just said, look, unless you're born a female, sorry, you're not competing. It's an unfair advantage, and we're putting an end to it. And I think you're going to see more of this as time goes by. These people have so been so vociferous. They have done everything they can to make everybody bow down to that altar. That I think people in general who recognize the folly of this argument in the first place. There are only two genders, male and female. And anybody who doesn't think so needs to spend some time on a psychologist's couch. Now, maybe I'm being unkind, but let's face it, you're born male or female and you don't get to pick. That's just the way it is. And anybody who denies that denies basic biology. So when somebody comes along who is a man and says, I'm a girl now, even if they go through the physical changes necessary to try to support that argument, they still have huge advantages over their female counterparts. They're going to be taller, stronger. They're going to be able to be more athletic. And it is simply not fair for people who are born female and how do I put this? Who are athletes in their own right at an elite level to compete against people in general they don't stand a chance against. It would be like having females play hockey in the NHL. No one would want that, not even as goalies, because they're going to get run over. They're going to get hurt. These guys are big, they're strong, and they're fast. And they are bigger and stronger and faster than their female counterparts, no matter how skilled the female hockey player is. And it's just crazy to think that there should not be some kind of balance. Look, what you want to do in your personal life, outside the public realm, I frankly don't care. I really don't. If you want to walk around in a dress, knock yourself out. If you want to wear jeans and a t-shirt and call yourself a male, I don't care. But don't think you can step on a field of competition and be treated as an equal when clearly you are not. Would you let Jaromir Jagr play against your local midget team? No, of course not. Not on a serious level. He might do it for fun, but certainly not to be taken seriously. So I'm glad to see the World Athletic Council come out and make this proclamation. And I think you're going to see more of this as time goes by. This is a trend that's going to grow. So it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. But I can't see it going the other way. Because too many parents and too many young ladies who have worked their lot, just like any other athlete, made the sacrifices, made the commitments to be at the very best they can be in their sport, to be given that kind of a disadvantage right out of the blocks.
Well, my response would have to start out with an explanation to our foreign listeners, or anyone else for that matter, that Jaromir Jagr is a hockey player, and that when we're talking about him playing against our midgets, we're not talking about people who are little people.
Yeah, I was talking about the hockey team. There's a level of hockey called midgets. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I just assume it's an old problem a lot of people have, is they think you know everything. They think the people you're talking to know as much as they do about what you're talking about.
Well, the thing is, Nick, I realize how important it is when we're talking about this subject in particular, and sort of many of the subjects that we talk about, when we talk about racism and wokeism going too far, and all of a sudden we're just casually injecting into the conversation. Can you imagine him playing against our midgets? People out there, their minds are exploding.
You get somebody from, I don't know, Tokyo. Listen, they play against midgets? Actually, there is some professional hockey in Japan, but that's very small fraction of a very big population.
Okay.
So most people wouldn't get it.
And now that we've sort of broken the ice on this particular topic with respect to midgets,
with a sledgehammer,
dare I pose the question, why has there not been a movement in the hockey world that where it intersects with the woke world for us to change the terminology and not use the term midget when it comes to really young and inexperienced players?
Don't give them any ideas, because what are you going to do about bantam and peewee?
Well, Well, Pee-wee and Bantam don't have the same connotation as midget
Oh,
does.
trust me, if they want to find a way to make it a disparaging comment, they'll make it a disparaging comment out of it.
Well, that's very fair.
Yeah, look what they did to
Yeah,
the Edmonton Elks.
look,
Really? Anyway, but
listen,
I really do think that there's going to be a backlash over this, and it's already started.
I think you're seeing a backlash already.
Yeah.
It's not very organized, and I don't think that it's ever going to become organized per se. But because I think that still people, the average person out there, I think when they look at this, they go, "Yeah, that's not right." But as we've said before, Nick, countless times now, people are just people, and they're busy with their day-to-day lives.
Right.
So they're not really interested in getting engaged. But now what's happening is now some of these issues are starting to impact their own day-to-day lives. It's having an effect. And it's when these kind of silly policies or silly laws impact the average person, that's when you start to see a real backlash. And
I
so
would-
we're seeing more and more now of an impact that wokeism is having on the day-to-day lives of just average people who they're not engaged in the ideological battles that are out there. They just want to live their lives
Well,
without being told, yeah, guys can go into women's change rooms.
okay, there was a mayor, I believe it was the mayor of Calgary this week, that passed a bylaw saying you couldn't protest in front of a public library. You had to have like a 125-foot or 300 or 400
Meter.
foot bubble. Nah, I'm not using metric. Uh,
Yards.
There's 100 meters, which is about 325 feet.
Okay.
So draw a circle around the library that big, and you can't protest the library for the books on its shelves that kids have access to, because doesn't see the problem with kids learning about this stuff at the local library. Never mind the role the parents play. Never mind who actually bought the books, like the parents. And I'm not talking about just schools. I'm talking about libraries.
Right.
Every book in a public library is paid for the same way everything else the government has is paid for. It's out of our tax money.
Right.
So the parents have every right to protest what's on those shelves. We're not talking about making a big heap in the middle of the street and burning them. We're just saying they are unsuitable for children and they should not be accessed by children. And, this is the kind of thing that's fueling this. You're right, it's not organized, but sometimes the hardest protest to fight against is the unorganized one, because you never know where it's going to come up next.
Right.
And you're seeing it all over the place, all over the United States. It's taking root here in Canada. It's taking place overseas now on an international level with this World Health Authority, not Health Authority, Athletic Council. It's coming, and they don't think they're going to be able to survive it.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see. But on a related topic, I think it's important to, if you're in government, to understand, whether you believe or accept the arguments of the people that you are ideologically out of sync with. The fact is that they have valid opinions. And so those parents who are protesting these things are protesting because they have an opinion. And their opinion may be different than the government of the day, but it's wrong to dismiss those opinions. And if you don't want the backlash, then you have to take seriously the criticism and you have to adjust your policies accordingly.
Right.
And this is the arrogance that I detect in the woke movement, if you will, amongst liberals. It's palpable, it's obvious, it's demonstrable. It's it's our way or the highway. That's their attitude. And that's just as maddening as the policy itself.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
you would think that amongst our political leaders, you could sit down and have a conversation. But the minute you sit down with these guys and you say, I don't think this is the right policy, all of a sudden they're calling you names. They
Hmm.
dismiss you. They kick you out of the
Cancel
building.
you.
They cancel you.
Right. And that I
Well, in
think,
that environment, are you surprised that there's a backlash?
no. And I'm also surprised we are out of time for this segment. We have to take a break.
I'm not surprised.
I should have said I'm not surprised. I phrased it wrong, but you get the idea.
I totally get it. We'll be back in a minute here on the Nick and Joe Show.
We all know that climate change is real. But with countries like China and India failing to do their part, what Canadians need now more than ever is a Made in Canada climate change plan. A real plan that responds to the real world needs of Canadians. A balanced plan that supports responsible economic growth and strengthens our essential infrastructure. A responsible plan that protects our natural environment and ensures that all Canadians enjoy the blessings of clean air, clean land, and clean water for generations to come. It's time for Canadian politicians to show real leadership in the world, putting partisanship and ideology aside. It's time for a sensible climate plan. We're the International Climate Science Coalition Canada, and we're ready to help. To learn more, visit our website, icsc-canada.com.
All right, welcome back. Final segment straight ahead. I want to make a comment. I saw something in the chat room that Kirk posted. He said, "Have you ever heard Tucker Carlson's way that he pronounces Canada's nation's capital? He calls it Ottawa." Now, look, I think he's doing it tongue in cheek. I think that Tucker's a smart guy, and he could turn to a staffer and say, "How do you say this? What's the correct pronunciation?" And somebody would say Ottawa. So I think he's doing it on purpose to poke some fun at Justin Trudeau because he has a ball with Justin Trudeau. Does not like him at all, and is not afraid to say so.
And Ottawa's not an unusual name for a place in the United States. There
Well,
are lots of
I was
towns
going
and
to say the
cities
same thing.
that are Ottawa.
So it was when I saw that, I said, okay, Tucker's having fun, and that's fine. I don't care. Like right now, with what's going on in Ottawa, it deserves to have some fun poked at it. Okay, we can continue. Basically, though, let's wrap up this particular topic by saying this will die a hopefully quick but ugly death.
Well, I think that you're right. I think that the whole trans movement has overreached. The whole woke movement, the whole left has overreached. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I share your optimism, Nick. There, the whole ideology is very firmly entrenched, and I suspect that it's going to take some time, and perhaps even some events before people sort of return to a more common sense, stable, sensible, thoughtful way of conducting public affairs. And here's the thing: that if I have to say what I'm looking for, okay, to sum it up in one word, dignity. Can we have a little
Amen.
dignity, please? All
Yes.
right. I don't want to tell people what they have to do or don't have to do. I don't want to run people's lives, but can we not have this enforced indignity shoved down our throats?
Well,
That's all.
as much as you don't want to run anybody else's lives, I also think you don't want anybody else running yours.
Yeah, yeah. And look, we live in a community, and in a community where we have neighbors and family and other people, we should be sensitive to their needs and their desires. And I guess this is one of the things that really bothers me about the left is that how in their rush to have their needs and their desires respected and addressed, they're willing to trample over everybody else's. There seems to be no recognition that there are other people out there. And,
Yeah.
nothing sums this up. Nothing better illustrates this than this whole idea of trans men invading female dressing rooms.
Yep.
Okay? And I'm being specific here about change rooms. I'm not even talking about bathrooms, okay? I'm talking about change rooms where people are getting undressed and changing, maybe they're at their local pool or whatever. And I'm saying, can nobody understand that there are women, there are girls that don't want to be leered at? So, dignity. Give them their dignity. Respect their need for privacy.
That's a word.
And that's what it's sort of like we oh my goodness, it's a violation of his rights or her rights or whatever, okay? I'm not talking about rights here. I'm just talking about basic decency, about basic being caring about the feelings of your neighbor.
Well, as much as rights are hugely important, one person's right ends when it infringes on another person's rights. In other words, you have a right to expect a certain amount of dignity, a certain amount of privacy when you're in a scenario like the one you laid out, that people of the opposite sex are not going to walk in on you while you're naked getting changed. That's there is a certain dignity that comes with being a human being that is not the same as if you were an animal, and it's it's very important that we get back to this idea of people having an inherent level of dignity that comes with being a human, that is separate and distinct from every other life form on the planet. And as long as we maintain that mentality, a lot of these problems sort themselves out, because no one, like you or I, would never knowingly, on purpose, walk into a woman's change room because it's a woman's change room. We might do it accidentally, turn the wrong way, go in the wrong bathroom. That happens all the time. But
I don't
immediately
and
turn around and walk out again.
And guess what? I don't need a law for that.
That's right. That's what I mean. We need to get back to this idea that it's like having a code of ethics. Okay. I hear it all the time. Oh, this council or this organization needs a code of ethics. We already have one. It's called the 10 Commandments. Just abide by those and you don't have to worry about anything else. Treat each other as you would be treated. Have some dignity. Respect the fact that the person you're arguing with is still a human being, inherent with a certain amount of dignity. Now, they can throw that dignity away through the way that they act, but as long as they are behaving in a dignified manner, then having dignity shown them, or having respect shown them because of their inherent dignity, is something we should do without even thinking. No government should ever have to tell us how to treat each other.
Unfortunately, we seem to have lost that. And this is a topic for a longer discussion on another episode, Nick. But it comes down to our losing our capacity to replenish the moral capital that we have always had. And I say this, I have said this before. I'll say it again. I'm not making a theological argument here, but the blueprint, if you will, for the moral structure of our society that defines us as Western civilization, okay, is the Bible. Mm-hmm. Now, you can follow a biblical blueprint without necessarily adhering to the theological aspects of it. And a word of caution here. Before you go to the corner store and you pick up your latest rendition of of the Bible, okay, understand that it's not something that you just open up and you read it and you understand everything that's going on. There's context, okay. So when the Bible talks about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth,
Yeah.
it's not telling you to go out if somebody pokes your eye out to take their eye out, or not somebody knocks your tooth out to take take their tooth out. That's not what it means. So it's when I say people should recognize that the Bible is the blueprint for Western civilization. Context is important too,
Yeah.
and so
Well, too many-
you need to learn properly
Well,
what's
too many
going on
people.
and study it and understand the nuances and when it's speaking metaphorically and when it's not speaking metaphorically, what's literal and what's not literal, and there's a whole scholarship in this,
Well, people spend their lives studying this book.
but we've lost any capacity, any sense of the importance of this.
But,
And as a
it's not-
consequence, we're
Go
not
ahead.
replenishing the moral capital. So
Well, what I was going to add to this was that the loss of context is not only just in the found underpinnings of our society, in other words, the Judeo-Christian ethic based on the Bible, but you also have it. Look at how often people will pull a line out of a speech given by somebody, whether it be an athlete or a politician or some kind of leader in the community, and take it out of context and twist it. It's almost an art form. And we have taken that to that level because of our own either misunderstandings or attempts to gotcha, all these kind of things have become so prevalent because we have forgotten about the dignity of the human being. And that's what, when I talk about having a code of ethics, okay, and the 10 Commandments, whether you believe in the authorship of the 10 Commandments is beside the point. The fact you have the 10 Commandments as a guide, as something to guide your legislators by, is a very good thing. And I think we've gotten away from that anything that draws on the Judeo-Christian ethic is now considered evil. Well, I read a book one time that said evil will become good and good will become evil. It get flipped on its head. Oh, wait, that was the same book. Anyway, but that's just what I wanted to comment on that was just this idea that a loss of dignity and the ability to take things out of context have been a great bane to the society.
yeah, it's complicated for sure. And I don't have all of the answers. I don't think any of us have all of the answers, and certainly we're not claiming to. But it's time that we tap on the brake a little bit, recognize that we should be respecting one another, respecting our society the way it is. I'm not arguing that we shouldn't change, but change should be slower. It should be more prudent. It should be conducted in a way that's respectful of tradition, respectful and not just tradition in terms of rites and rituals, but tradition in terms of our traditional morality and how we behave with one another. You don't just throw these things out with impunity. And this is the thing.
We should also not embrace change just for its own sake.
This is exactly true as well. Let's do away with this notion that we can just tear down the status quo and rebuild it because somehow or other we're smart enough and experienced enough and understanding enough of the world. The world and humanity is just far too complex for that. And so chill out, ladies and gentlemen. Chill out.
Well, you know what that means.
I think it means that it's time for us to call it an evening almost.
Yeah, I want to remind people that for those of you who are in the chat room or in the chat room listening to us on different platforms, tell your friends and neighbors about us that we're now on Sunday evening, 8 till 10 Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Daylight Time now. daylight savings time, and we'll get into when are we going to do away with that?
Right.
Because every year they say it's the last year of it.
And
But,
you can catch the podcast of our previous shows at the nickandjoeshow.com. All
that's
one
where we're
word.
going next.
That's where you were going next.
But that's fine. You can go ahead and do it too. I don't care who does it. All right. As Spock would put it, I have no ego to bruise. Anyway, one of the greatest lines ever uttered. Completely false, but that's not the point. All right. With that said, for Joseph and I, I'm going to bow out this evening. Thank you all for joining us. We hope that you have a great week, and we will see you all again right back here next Sunday night, 8 till 10 Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Daylight Savings Time. And in the meantime, we'll be Caritas et Amor, Deus, CBS. Good evening. God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind and a following sea.